Hi, and welcome to the Spawdcast. My name's Carrie Hyde, and I'm your host, and I'm your pet's life coach. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We're kind of going to pull all of the stuff we've learned about pets, and we're going to be talking about all of it together. So I brought on a guest co-host, and I also have our expert here, who is also a podcaster. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring Krista on, which I will introduce her to you in a minute, is because if we want to have change in life in anything that we do, I think it's very, very important that we come together and we work together. We can't make change by ourselves. We need each other. And so as pet parents and pet educators, we need each other. And we need to be able to communicate and not be so competitive with each other and yet be together. And Krista actually reached out to me, and so she was the one. I get a little nervous, like people are going to be competitive and they're not going to want to talk. But Krista contacted me and said, hey, let's get together so we can reach more people. And then I also wanted to bring on as my guest co-host somebody who also has a small business and understands about how important it is to come together and work together as a whole to make change. And so I wanted to bring my very good friend, and I want to introduce you to her. Her name is Laura Lampers. Hi, Laura.
Hello, how are you?
So Laura is a huge pet lover, and I've been teaching her along the ways about diet change and those kind of things. But Laura also runs a small company called Pure Romance, and she started out, and why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
So I am a Pure Romance consultant, and so what I do is I have in-home ladies' night parties, and in-home and both virtual now with everything going on. And I teach women about sexual wellness as well as their bodies, body confidence, bath and beauty products. So it's a really great opportunity to empower women, educate women, give them self-esteem. And then at the same time, it's a great bonding time and opens up communication between friends. I also offer private and couples consultations. So kind of breaking down the barriers of teaching people that sexual health and sexual wellness is not a dirty word.
Except every time she says it, I giggle. I giggle. So, but Laura's here so that we can understand, just about how confidence, no matter where that confidence comes from, is super important. And when we're talking about pet-related stuff, confidence is very important because a lot of times, and I'm sure our next guest is going to help us understand this a little bit more, when we find ourselves in a vet hospital, a lot of times, if we're not confident, we're not able to speak up for our pets. And so, without further ado, I really want to introduce you to the host of Wag Out Loud, Krista. There I go. Okay, there's the last name. There it is. I'm going to be known for that forever. It's Krista Karpowich. Hi, Krista. Welcome to the show.
Hi, ladies. Thanks for chatting today. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, this is going to be some good stuff. Tell me a little bit about. So I spoke with you before, and we talked a little bit about your dog that you had prior to doing any podcasting. Can you tell us a little bit about your dog? The one that had the seizures?
Yes, that was Higgins, and that was a long time ago, probably 15 years ago. He was having seizures and went to 3 different veterinarians trying to figure out why he was having seizures, and nobody could figure it out. And during that time, we were looking at getting a second dog. She was an older dog, and the people said, we will only sell her to you if you promise to feed raw. So I had never fed raw before. Okay, we promise. And because I was feeding her raw, I might as well feed Higgins raw as well. And once he got the raw diet, he never had another seizure.
Wow. Wow. Those are the stories that, wouldn't you agree? Those are the stories that stand behind us and push us, right? We remember those, and they push us to do, to make the difference in other pets' lives, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the light bulb came on. Oh, wait a minute. Nutrition is obviously so important. We've been brought up to just pour kibble into a bowl and think that that's okay. Every meal for the entire life of the dog. Well, I equate that to you and I eating Captain Crunch cereal every day, twice a day for the rest of our life. Is that nutrition?
Yeah. No, and it's sold as if it's nutrition. But those are stories. I have stories like that as well. I have a dog that's staying with me, has been with me now about 4 years. His name is Beau, and Beau was brought to me. I think I told you about Beau. Beau's owner wanted to put him to sleep because he had seizures. And I said, let me take him and see if I can change his diet and see if that will make the difference in his seizures. And it did. He's been with me now, I want to say 4 years, and he has never had a seizure in my care. He's medicine-free, he's seizure-free, he's healthy as all healthy can be. And that when people like us come out and we want to educate you guys, it's really, I'm sure Krista you would agree, it's that driving force, and you see it over and over. It's not one case. I know a lot of veterinarians want to say, oh, this is just anecdotal, but when does it stop being anecdotal, do you think, and being reality, even though we may not have the science tests behind it? When do you think our anecdotal stories become important?
They already have. Unfortunately, money makes the world go round, and it's the large companies, I don't need to name names, but the companies that are making the processed dry food that put money towards studies just to validate their quote unquote food. I can't even call it food.
Right.
The raw community, unfortunately, doesn't have those big dollars to do studies and clinical trials. But all you have to do is talk to raw feeders to find out the benefits, and every single one of them will tell you a similar story. Here were the problems that my dog was having, whether it was seizures or allergies or digestive issues, GI, diabetes.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go on and on.
Right.
And switching to a raw food diet, oh, well, my dog doesn't have all those issues anymore.
Yeah.
And we love to talk about poop, don't we? And when they're on a healthy diet, they don't have the diarrhea and all the issues that a lot of people feeding processed food see. Right.
So anecdotal becomes that's what divides us, right? The science, like you said, the big companies spend an enormous amount of money trying to put out their scientific evidence and their studies and their case studies. And you pointed out something very important. When you think about a company that's trying to sell nutrition, like scientific evidence that broccoli is healthy for you, you're not going to find a whole lot of it because the money isn't behind it, because we're just talking about feeding a nutritious diet. And so I challenge my listeners, and I know you do as well, to question your veterinarians, when they argue with you, when you say, hey, my friend switched to a species appropriate diet and her dog's doing so much better, and then you come up against that challenge with your veterinarian. Do you have any advice for people when they do get challenged against that? Because it does happen. You show me the scientific evidence, veterinarians will say, that raw diet is good. What would you offer our listeners to challenge that?
Carrie, I like what you say, that we do have to be our animals' advocates. And, we see the difference with what we feed them and how they're doing. Veterinarians, they're amazing. But if you can just think about, they are not only looking at dogs, but they have to know about all different species. A small animal vet, reptiles and birds and cats, and they will admit to you that they might have had maybe one day of nutrition in vet school.
Right.
Exactly.
And the people that were courting them in vet school were these large companies. Here is what you need to sell to make money. Put this in your lobby when you have your practice up and running. The science diet, the Royal Canin, it's, again, to me, it's not food, it's feed.
Right.
So that's all they know.
Yeah.
They don't know about the raw diet or the whole food fresh diet. And I think that's slowly changing, but they don't know everything.
Right. And
don't.
it's okay for them to not know everything. And so, and I stress that a lot to veterinarians. It's okay to say, I don't know anything about nutrition. I'm going to look right at the veterinarians that are watching or listening. It's okay to say you don't know anything about nutrition. And it's okay as a pet parent to say, hey, maybe my vet doesn't know anything about nutrition. I should start to look out on that. But before we go too far and getting into what we're talking about, I would just like you to, could you define what a raw diet means to you?
Yes, well, there's all different. There's prey model, which it amazes me the people that go to the great lengths of finding the muscle meat, the organ meat, the bone. You know, you might as well just throw a carcass in the backyard, which is great. I wish I could do that. I feed commercial raw, and I rotate the heck out of the proteins. He gets a different protein every meal because, as you know, the amino acid profile is different with every protein. There's the true raw feeders. A lot of them don't believe in adding fruits or veggies to a raw diet, but I do. I believe in the phytonutrients.
I do as well.
So that is why I started on this path, because as you know, there is so much information out there.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
There's conflicting information everywhere.
Oh my gosh. Are dogs carnivores? Are they omnivores? And you see the vegan dog food.
Now there's vegan dog food.
Yes. So you have to do your research, and that's why I do feed raw. As I said, I feed a commercial raw, but I have one small dog, so it's affordable. But there are days when I just make my own. I do a veggie base with eggs. You know, I just scramble some cage-free eggs. He gets one day. That's almost nature's perfect protein is the egg. So canned sardines and water that you can get from the grocery store.
Awesome choice.
Great omegas.
Yep.
He loves them. So I could go on and on, but there are different levels of the raw diet.
Right.
And, you know, you have the barf diet, which is a whole different story where you feed bones as well.
Yeah. So for our listeners, it's important for you to understand there is a difference between, like Krista's telling you, you have levels, and some people get really, really into it. I know, and that I think is what gets scary. But what I want to make sure our listeners know is that a raw diet doesn't mean that you're just giving uncooked food. It needs to be a balanced diet, which is why in a lot of cases it's good to go with a commercial diet because they will have balanced it for you. But I've always said that if you really want to know what's going in your pet's mouth, the best way to do it is to do it at home, but you have to make sure you do it right. I don't know about you, I speak to a lot of my clients who will say they're doing the raw diet, and they will mix together chicken and maybe some rice and some broccoli and some kale, and then they say that they're doing a complete balanced diet, which that would not be. So, and then that leads us down the road of carbohydrates, so non-soluble carbohydrates. So I know you've probably learned so much from the time Higgins ended up losing or getting rid of his seizures from feeding a raw diet. And then, so how did you get from that to now you're an educator on Wag Out Loud? How did you get there?
Good question. I was in a JOB and I was helping small business owners. I was doing business advisory just in 2018, and I was walking my dog Winston, and it came into my mind, I need to become a canine nutritionist. I really want to learn more. And it took me about a year to get that certification, and then I was off and running. So much to learn. I mean, it's chemistry, biology, it's a lot, as you know. So that's what happened, and I wasn't going to do advisory or consulting on a one-to-one basis. I am the most non-tech person in the entire world. And I just thought, let's do a podcast.
And
So
you just started it. You just picked it up.
I did. I took a course. Pat Flynn is one of my heroes in the business world, and he has a course on how to podcast. So thank God I took that and learned all the ins and outs of what to do and the technology and the equipment.
There's so much.
There is.
I know for me, I have been educating my clients for the last 15, 18 years. And I was kind of I always say I was kind of a closet raw feeder because I didn't want to step on any veterinarian toes in my area. And so I kept very, very quiet for many, many years. In 2008, when we had the big recall in 2008, I got a little bit more vocal, but I am like you. I don't know anything about technology. Like, it's so bad. It's so embarrassing. But I just want to encourage our listeners that if you have something that you can educate people with, wouldn't you think podcasting is just this way to do it, this way to get out there and get your passion and something, you're passionate about for people to listen to educate. Do you find this a good way to do it through podcasting?
Absolutely. They're saying that, more and more people are listening to podcasts as opposed to, the bloggers years ago.
Yeah.
Everybody read articles and blogging. And now I think podcasting has surpassed that as a medium.
That's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Especially for us as pet parents and pet educators, like, we now have this way that we can reach more people. Because at the spa, I probably see 60 dogs a day, probably about 10 cats a day, and that's not gonna make the change across the world that we need. We need to get more education go out there. So, how long have you been podcasting?
A year and a half.
A year and a half. That's awesome. And so, who was your first guest? Do you remember your very first guest?
My first guest was a local veterinarian here that I knew as a friend, a friend of a friend, and just reached out to him and said, would you be on the show? And his topic was Puppy 101.
Puppy 101.
Puppy 101.
Was he a holistic veterinarian?
He is not. He's a conventional vet. And it's funny how everything switched for me. I had him talking about vaccines and all the and neutering and all of that. And it soon turned into that my focus was integrative medicine, holistic medicine. And I love the integrative approach. Conventional veterinarians, they have a place all day long. But when you can introduce a holistic mindset, and then there's so many other treatments that can be either added as a complement to Western medicine or as a standalone. And I think that gives our dogs a much better chance at living a longer, healthier life.
Right.
I think that's a really good topic because I know that a lot of times I meet people who are brand new pet owners and have absolutely no clue as to what an appropriate diet is or kind of their overall long-term health. What would you say is maybe a good avenue to begin research as a new pet owner, as how they should or shouldn't, be feeding, or are there any good resources out there for brand new pet owners that want the best out of their animals but just don't know where to go?
It's an awesome question.
It is an awesome question, and it's a can of worms question.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Because there are so many, I wouldn't say go to PetSmart and buy a bag of dog food. I would encourage you to talk to a nutritionist first, like Carrie.
Or Krista.
Thank you. Or you could go into these boutique stores that most of them do have higher end food, and talk to them, and you'll know right away if they know what they're talking about or not. Some of them go to the
Right.
lengths of looking into the companies that they put on their shelves, and are they sustainable food? Where are their ingredients sourced from? And again, that's what we talked about earlier. There's just so much information. And that's why I like the holistic approach, because holistic veterinarians look at the entire animal, as opposed to most Western veterinarians are just putting a Band-Aid on an issue and not getting to the root cause of what's causing it. Let's just give them pharmaceuticals.
So I always look at integrative medicine as a veterinarian who's looking at integrative, which is the combination of both worlds. It's Western and it's also holistic minded. But I always look at them as the integrative veterinarian will look at before, during, and after. So whereas a Western only conventional veterinarian, they will look at your dog because he has skin, he's itching. They go right to, it's probably fleas, because that's the quickest thing they can go to, or they'll go, it's probably allergies, without looking at what led your dog up to this, and if I give him this medication, what will it do in the future? And that's why I love integrative, because integrative, they have a bigger toolbox, and they're gonna wanna question you and ask you different questions. So I love your advice about talking to people who are nutritionists first and making sure, so that's a great answer. I'm gonna add to that. I send my clients to Dr. Karen Becker's website, because it is very difficult as a pet parent, especially a brand new pet parent, Laura, who doesn't know what to do, and you have a veterinarian and you have a pet store owner and they're at odds. So I always send my clients, here you go, here's another veterinarian. So it helps to, listen, and that's why, Krista, that's why you bring people on your show, right? To try to help bridge that gap between what your veterinarian is saying in the office and what other veterinarians and other pet professionals would say. When you agree, I mean, that's why you bring them on the show. That's the education part of it, so that they have more strength, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, these experts, I mean, I'm learning every single day.
Yeah.
Of course, I want to give my dog the best life possible.
Sure.
And you don't know what you don't know. And that's why these experts are sharing such fabulous information, and I just get giddy. It's like, it's so cool.
It really is so cool to think that we have the tools to make our pets live literally healthier lives and longer lives. I say healthier first because some people think that a long life equals health, and it doesn't. I've known pets that have lived horribly long lives and have been miserable their whole life. So healthy first, long second is our goal, I think, as podcasters and people that are talking. I wanted to ask you, so there's lots of challenges in podcasting, right? We all have these challenges. Can you think of any, because if someone's listening to this and they're like, well, I'm ready. I'm listening to these girls and they're doing such a great job, and we've got this podcasting and more people are listening to podcasting, I'm going to do it. Is it all roses? Is there challenges you've had to face?
Sure. Just the recording aspect of it. I have never been live with a guest, in the same room. So it's always been remote recording. And I've been through so many different platforms that did not sound right. And, there's a learning curve. I know 2 guests I remember, I know I recorded, I know that I saved the file, and then it was gone.
Oh,
so
my
I had to call them, redo.
Yeah.
I just felt awful. But it's technology. You have to go with the flow and laugh. I've become really good friends with Dr. Marty Goldstein, who is a pioneer in integrative veterinary medicine.
Yes.
And we've had technical challenges, and he just laughs.
That's awesome.
as you know, the people in this industry are so amazing and down to earth that you just have to do what you can do. And the editing is a whole nother thing.
A whole nother thing. Yeah.
Woo, yes.
And then, just focusing on what's important, right? The message is what's important, and the rest of the stuff, it just will all fall into place. I tell the story, my very first podcast, I thought I was gonna write all the notes out, and I had everything written on a piece of paper, because now we do it for YouTube as well, but before you couldn't see me. I could do it in my pajamas. And so I showed up with this piece of paper, and I had every question written out, and I had it all. It was a disaster. I mean, the first person that I interviewed was Joey Weichman from Vital Essentials, and to this day, he probably thinks, what the hell's wrong with this girl? I was like, I had it on a piece of paper, not even a laptop. Like, I wrote all my notes out all night, and I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I obviously gave that up, because it got me focused too much on not the message, but more on what questions. And so I think that's so important with what we're doing, because the message is so, so, so valuable and important, that we can continue doing it. So you had touched on a little bit earlier that you had started out with raw diet, and that was something that you wanted to talk about. And then through that, you said you brought somebody on who was talking about vaccines. So there's this learning curve that we all go through, and I used to be a vet tech, and I used to give vaccines to dogs all day long. But what other things, so you went from nutrition, and then tell us some of the other things that you found were so interesting and wow, blow my mind kind of situations. I know vaccines had to be one of them.
Oh, yes. I think in a nutshell, it's everything that is causing cancer and other diseases in our dogs. And when you get to the level of, well, here they are, over-vaccination, glyphosate, I could go on and on
right.
about glyphosate, which we are ingesting
ourselves,
as well.
Right.
Yes. EMF, I just never knew about all of these things. Essential oils, people think they're great, and then they have all these diffusers in every room.
Yep.
And your dog cannot take that on. If they had a chance, I'm sure a lot of these, especially synthetic oils, they're going to run.
Yeah.
That's too much.
Yeah. I just had a client, just real quick, just tell me the other day, little tiny Chihuahua, and when they burn essential oils, she leaves the room. She leaves, and she's leaving because their olfactory glands are so much, and what we smell is nothing compared to what your pets smell. So we have to be very careful with those things. That was something I learned through just continuing on with my education, which is daily. So yeah, so essential oils, being careful with those and burning those. And what else have we learned? We've learned so much. I mean, we both started doing this about the same time, podcasting. So
yes.
What else kind of blew your mind? How about spaying and neutering?
That's a whole nother,
right?
We're told that when we have this puppy at a certain age, that is when you're supposed to do it. And now we have so many studies coming in that it's better to either wait till they're older,
what?
Or you don't have to do it at all.
Don't spay and neuter our dogs at 4 months old? What?
I know. Does that blow your mind or
That's
what?
That's crazy. Did you know that, Laura?
You wait till after their first period, right?
Yeah, so we hear, this is exactly, you hear like some people have said, oh, well, I want her to have her first heat, or I want her to have her first puppy. I want her to have a litter, like she needs to have a litter. So we get all of this information that comes in, but what we're realizing, right, is that what it really is making sure that all their growth platelets and all their hormones are used properly for what they need in order to grow. It's not necessarily about the first heat or having the first puppy. It's really about making sure that their hormones are intact for the growth that they need to do. So yeah, so that's one, spaying and neutering. What else? Gosh, it's crazy.
Well, earlier you made a mention which was really good because you were talking about, the introduction of raw diet, and there's a lot of finances that go into things. And, a little bit about, my story is I've known Carrie for a really long time, and she was always telling me the importance of nutrition in my animal, and I'm like, girl, I hear you, but I'm a single mom. I don't make a lot of money. I just can't afford to quadruple my food spending budget. Like, it's just not in it. And then I had an experience with my dog that changed everything. And unfortunately, being able to experience that, changed my mindset because, one day I came home, I actually had some friends over and my dog was going crazy. I thought, honestly, she was having a schizophrenic episode. I didn't know what was going on. I called Carrie. I couldn't get her calmed. She was crazy around me. She would be calm, like my friend could calm her. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And she's like, it sounds like she's having a severe allergic reaction to something. And I was just buying store-bought food. And she's like, bring Lily to me and I will take care of her. And she fasted her and slowly introduced a raw diet. And, being able to see that transformation and being able to see that difference, and even just the life that she had of a more quality diet, I made sacrifices from that point forward, to make sure that as a single parent, I could afford to buy quality food for my dog. And I didn't think I could sacrifice that before, but because I had that experience, I was able to say, you know what, I need to be a responsible pet owner and I need to do what is best for my pet, not what's best for my pocket. Those type of experiences, sometimes just listening to the message over and over, eventually it'll soak in with people, and hopefully before they have an experience with their animal. And I tried relaying that to my parents with their cats, and they kept going with what the vet recommended. And I'm like, look, just this small change will make such a difference. Yeah. And they wouldn't do it because it was $4 more. I'm like, I will give you the $4. And they have the money. And unfortunately, both of their cats, they had to put down within about a week of each other for severe kidney failure.
Yeah.
And, at that point, it's too little too late. And,
that's why Krista's out there speaking, because we really, I love being able to help the people who are already in that position. But wouldn't you agree, Krista, we really need to get these animals not to be in that position.
Right.
And so I think most little mom and pop stores, like you talked about, that are teaching nutrition, don't you think they're not just trying to sell you food. If you get the right one, I know for my staff, I've all had them certified pet nutritionists, if you come into them, our job is to get your dog to eat healthier. Our job is not to sell you what we have. And you mentioned eggs earlier. So a lot of times I tell people, just adding an egg and removing some of the kibble. So we have all sorts, if you work with the right nutritionist, and you listen to some of these podcasts, you're going to listen to the experts that Krista brings on to talk about what we can do. Because that's something we know in the industry, right, Krista, is that money is definitely an issue that can prevent our animals from eating healthier. What do you tell your listeners?
I am so glad that you ladies brought this up. First of all, you're going to pay somewhere, whether it's up front.
Yeah.
Sorry, pay me now, pay me later.
Or you're going to be paying for all of the issues that your dog is going to have. You're going to have really high veterinary bills.
Yep.
Right.
You can feed a whole food diet on a budget.
Absolutely.
There are so many ways to stretch it out. If you are feeding kibble, Maybe you top it with a whole food or a freeze-dried raw if you don't want to go with raw. Maybe every other day. Maybe add, we talked about the eggs or the sardines or blueberries. Just give them a couple blueberries. They have amazing antioxidant properties.
Yep.
If you want to go completely raw, there are co-ops out there.
Yep.
You just have to Google my closest co-op.
Can you tell our listeners what a co-op is so they understand?
Yeah, you are joining forces with other people in your area to get fresh raw meat from local farmers that have the pasture-raised, pasture-finished meat. Because that's a whole nother story, the factory farming that is going on. Again, it's what we are eating as well. If you really take a look at what is being fed to the animals that become our dog's food is insane. They are being fed antibiotics. They're being fed genetically modified corn. I've heard that they're being fed baked goods, donuts and bread. And
right.
How can that animal's not healthy, so you're then feeding that to your dog.
Right.
Yes, that's a whole nother thing. The regulation in the pet food industry.
Oh my gosh. That's like 10 episodes.
That's
if
or
we just
lack
go over
thereof,
the
right?
lack there. There is no real regulation in pet food. There just isn't.
And that's something that I try to, I still consider myself a novice, and I always refer people to contact Carrie, like whether I know someone in Texas or in California. I'm like, call Carrie because she will guide you and help you with the nutrition factor. And I was listening to one of your podcasts, a couple of them, and one of them was saying exactly that. It's not just raw, but what value of raw? Like, are you feeding someone who's getting less than desirable corn, or are you free range, or are you organic, or are you grass fed? Depending on the type of meat, like in a chicken, free range is better than maybe organic because of the variety of food that they get to eat. It doesn't necessarily have to be organic, but you definitely don't want them, having those less than desirable properties, especially if your animal's allergic to corn and they're being fed corn, So knowing what food source is going in. So, I think that's really cool that they do have co-ops available because as a single individual trying to get this one by one, it'd be very difficult. But when you have people coming together, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And, trying to share that information with people is great.
Yeah. One of the things I always say, Krista, is that feeding your pet healthy is affordable. It can be affordable. It may not be as convenient as the kibble, but it's doable, right? You may have to go to the store, you may have to join a co-op, you may have to do all of this stuff, but every one of us on this planet can feed our pets healthy, no matter how poor or rich you are. And believe me, a lot of times the people with the most money are the ones that are the least likely to feed their pets healthy because they want the convenience. They don't have time because they're out, doing their whatever they're doing, and it becomes more of a time issue. So, and I see that all the time. And so if you're listening to this, we know it can be done, and we're trying to offer you all of this information. So, Krista, so was there ever a moment when you were doing this and you thought, I don't know if I'm making any change? Was there ever a moment where you thought, why am I wasting my time? And I ask you that because sometimes I get into that space where I'm like, is this worth it? Is somebody listening? Is somebody am I saving one dog? Because I'll do it. But do you ever feel like maybe this isn't going to get where you want it to get?
Absolutely, because with podcasting, the downside of it is that you are giving information and it goes out into the ether and you don't hear from anybody.
Right.
You know, you have this little packaged episode sharing it and it's crickets.
Yeah.
Unless
there's no applause.
It's when you get the feedback, and I started doing master classes with my experts and webinars, and then the people would actually be there live, and you get to see the correspondence, the back and forth, and the questions, and that's what gets me excited. And the feedback, just hearing that somebody listened to an episode and made a change, and here's what happened. I love the success stories.
Yeah. Do you remember any of those?
Yeah, one of my friends actually very early on was feeding kibble, and her dog had hot spots all over her legs and feet, and made a suggestion of, if you have to feed kibble, let's find a better kibble and let's add some raw. And if you can't afford it every day, let's spread it out to maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And she could not believe the difference. Her skin cleared up, no more itching, no more biting at her feet.
Wow.
Her fur was not falling out in clumps. It was beautiful and shiny. Her breath was better. She lost weight. Her stools were firm. So that is what I hear time and time again, the success stories.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting.
It really is, because the animals, they wouldn't choose that food. I say that a lot. They wouldn't, if given the opportunity from birth and nothing else was ever available, and you put kibble and you put a species appropriate diet down, a puppy would gravitate towards that if given the choice. If they knew what was in kibble. Now, kibble companies will spray all sorts of stuff on it to entice your animal. But if an animal was able to dissect and go, this is what's in this, and this is what's in this, no animal would ever choose kibble. They wouldn't choose preservatives and processed stuff that's going to make them itch and feel horrible about themselves. And so when we hear those success stories, and it's what keeps me going too. I mean, every once in a while I have people, have you ever had anybody say to you, this didn't work? You know, they try it for a week and they say it didn't work. Have you ever come across any of that?
Not that it didn't work. It's more that my dog didn't want to eat it.
Yeah.
That you have maybe a picky eater.
Yeah.
And it's funny with raw, a lot of people, you know, it's frozen and or refrigerated when you're feeding it.
Right.
And I just say, did you try leaving it out at room temperature for maybe 45 minutes to an hour?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then they'll eat it.
And then they'll eat it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's not coming right out of the fridge.
Yeah.
Well, in sometimes different varieties. I remember my Lily, she loved the fish raw, but when I would buy the beef raw, she did not really like it. And it's like, she would nibble at it and she would eventually eat it because she was secretly a fat girl. And
she wasn't
but
secretly.
she was.
There was no.
She's a total fat girl. I had
She was
to
a
really
pug.
limit her food. If I did not measure her food, she would eat it all until she got sick. Like, she was a fat girl, okay? I'm trying to be nice to my poor Lily.
There is no secret about it. She was also the best breakdancing dog you've ever seen in your life.
Oh, yes.
This dog, we have video of her, and she breakdances. I told Laura one time, you need to get me a, you know how, I don't know if I'm aging myself, but when the breakdancers would take their cardboard out on the street and then they would do their spins. So I had Laura do it one time with Lily. I said, I need this video.
It's
amazing.
And it's so funny she says that, because earlier
She was
on,
awesome.
she would do it, like, especially when she was younger. I mean, just over and over and over again. And I really wanted to get her, like, the little wrist pads on a thing and get, like, a strobe light. And I never did it, and I wish I did. But I do have one video, which
we'll post it.
I got it.
We'll post it. You guys got to see the breakdancing Lily. She's not with us anymore, but she was.
Yeah,
amazing.
this is Lily's breakdancing after, you know, about 7 pounds too much. So
yeah. So one of the things I say about kibble a lot is people don't realize. I'm sure Krista, you've shared this with your listeners, is that there's a lot of sugar in kibble, and sugar is very addicting. So if you took a heroin addict, a human heroin addict, and you gave them the choice between heroin and broccoli, they're going to pick the heroin. And so when you're trying to wean your pet off of kibble, it can be difficult. Do you have any advice you give your listeners for how to wean your pet off of an addiction?
Wow, you just brought up a whole nother topic, Carrie.
I know.
I mean, if you're feeding kibble, unfortunately, you are feeding a bowl of inflammation.
Yep.
And that is going to lead to disease, to leaky gut. And I'm sorry, what was the question? Because I'm going to go off on a tangent.
That's okay. I go off on tangents all the time. How can we transition our dogs from kibble when they're addicted? So how do we get them through the stages that they go through sometimes? Because I've had very difficult dogs he'll go days without food because they want that kibble. But do you have any advice to our listeners on how you can get your pet, if they are addicted to those sugars, off and onto a species appropriate diet?
Sure. Well, as we know, we want to transition slowly over a 7 to 10 day period and lessen the amount of kibble into the new food. I have yet to see a dog that doesn't like bone broth or goat milk.
Yeah.
So if you do have a picky eater, even with the kibble, you can always add that. And dogs love both of those.
Yeah.
You can either make your own bone broth, which is just really, really easy, or they do sell it in these boutique pet stores as well.
Yeah. It's a struggle because a lot of times clients will say, well, if he doesn't like it, then it must not be good for him. And I get that a lot. And I say, no, you really have to get your mindset to understanding what addiction is, because our pets do become addicted to it. So transitioning, sometimes I tell people, like you mentioned, the bone broth and the goat's milk, that's kind of a fasting we're talking about, right? Where you don't offer actual food to them, but give them bone broth and milk maybe for a day or two and then reintroduce, right? That's one way to do it.
You could, or just add it to the kibble and new food as you are transitioning. Because they are so yummy and really good for them as well.
Well, we are going to leave on that note to see if we can get some of our listeners to transition. So I'm glad we ended with kind of letting people know what they can do to transition onto a raw. But I'm so excited that we were able to talk a little bit about all the things we both have learned, and I hope Laura's learned some stuff as well. But being able to kind of look at how you progressed from just, I fed my dogs different. Now I want to feed a raw diet. Now I want to do a podcast. Whoa, wait a minute. Vaccines are bad. We're over vaccinating our dogs, we're spaying them too young, to all of the stuff that we've learned through podcasting. So I know myself am going to enjoy continuing to listen to you educate me and your guests educating me more, because you have to continue educating. Even Laura knows a good example real quick is when I first started helping Laura with nutrition, I was all about the better kibble. There's a better kibble. And that came from the 2008 for me. But now I just got done telling Laura, I don't sell kibble anymore. Like so now Laura's got to come along. And I'm not, that doesn't make me wrong. It just makes it that there's new information, and as we learn and as we grow. And so thank you so much for doing podcasting and being on my team or me on your team. I'm so glad I'm on your team, because this is the team to be on, and it's the team that's fighting for your pets, and not just your pets, but for you, right? Laura's gone through, we've all gone through a pet dying too young or being sick their whole life. And so, being on this team that wants to stop that is pretty amazing.
And that's really a good point that you brought up, is just always stay a student.
Always.
You think you know everything at one point in time, and then some new information comes, and just be open and receptive to it and learn as much as you can.
Yeah.
So always stay a student and always keep an open mind and do your research.
Krista,
Great point.
one final thought to your listeners that are our listeners, everybody who's listening, that you would give one final little thought to everybody?
I think what we tried to hit home with during our time together today was veterinarians are amazing. They're amazing at what they do. They have a lot on their plate, but you have to be your dog's advocate, and don't go with everything that your vet says. Maybe get a second opinion. Maybe seek out an integrative veterinarian.
Yeah.
But to your point, Laura, do your research, because there is an overabundance of information and so many opinions that you are the ultimate caregiver of your dog, and you're the one that's going to make the difference.
And be
Exactly.
open to those opinions, right? So many times
Absolutely.
people, I think back, if I would have just stopped at Better Kibble, if I would have just stopped and I was still there, how many less animals would be helped? So be open, don't get stuck. Even if you get onto the raw diet and someone comes with more information that raw diet is bad, you need to listen. I'm not saying that it is bad. I'm saying that you need to listen so that you can continue to grow. And I know Krista and I will hope that we can continue to provide this growth for you, right, Krista? We're here. We're both here to support any animal communities. So thank you so very much for taking your time out of your day and being here. And Laura, thank you so much. So for our listeners, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast, the Spawdcast. You can also like and follow us on our Facebook page. And in our show notes, you will find all of Krista's information, how to get a hold of her and contact her, as well as Laura Lamper's, in order to get a hold of her. In the meantime, please keep your pets healthy and living longer. And if you ever need any advice, I'm here for you. Krista's here for you. You can contact us through our show notes. Thank you. Bye, everybody.